Alright, so we got a 2008 Acura TSX in here with the 2.4 K-series engine. We have a starter that's out on it. It's just clicking. So we're going to remove the upper, I'll show you how to remove the upper intake manifold to get down to it. It's not a real hard job. Some people complain because you have to remove the manifold on it, but it's really not that bad. It takes 10-15 minutes to remove that, and then you're right down to the starter. It's right there. It's pretty easy to get to once you get there. It's mainly just a lot of little cables and connectors that we have to move out of the way, but the actual manifold itself is not that hard to get out. So we'll start on it now. It's pretty cold here in St. Louis. I just turned the furnace on in the garage, so I might freeze to death before we get this video done, but we'll see how it goes. So I'll get you over there by the car, and we'll start working on it. Alright, so the starter kind of lives under here. You can actually, if you look down in between the manifold here, you can kind of see it, the runners. You can kind of see the starter. And you don't have to pull the whole intake manifold off with the injectors and all that. You're just going after this upper plenum here. So your throttle body, your intake hose, and then you know, you have various cables and stuff. Sometimes I've done quite a few of these. Sometimes I don't take the throttle body off of the upper plenum. I leave it on there and just kind of set everything off to the side. I can't remember on these TSXs, but yeah, it's just a matter of getting these 12mm nuts out. We're going to take off. What we'll do first, I'm just going to go ahead and take off this intake hose here, and then we'll kind of take a look. I know I got to take off this and some of the connectors. There's a little metal bracket usually that goes in the middle of this. It goes down. That's actually probably the hardest part, is getting to that. That's kind of, sometimes that can be a little bit ignorant, but other than that, it's pretty straightforward. And we'll just remove everything that we have to move this out of the way, and like I said, go from there. So I'm just gonna first remove this intake. Looks like you got one electrical connector, and you have a couple hoses you have to take off, and then the actual connector itself, obviously. So I'm gonna do that real quick, and then we'll pick it back up. Alright, so I got his air intake hose off, and what I'm going to do next is go down below and get that bracket off. There's a bracket that goes to the block, the bottom of the block, up to this intake. It kind of supports it. And a lot of times it's off if someone's changed the starter before, because it's real hard to get to, and a lot of people don't put them back on. I've ran into that a lot where I've changed the starter, I worked on the manifold in some way, and that bracket's gone. This one's never been messed with, so it's still on there. You need a 12mm, and I'll show you the tools I'm using. Like I said, it's probably the most challenging part of this job, especially on these Acuras. On the Elements and CRVs, there's a lot more room to get to it, and it's easier to get the bracket off. But on the TSX, it's obviously a lot more compact in here, and you kind of need the right combination of tools to get to it. So I'm going to take you under there and kind of try to show you what I can. It's pretty tight under there, but I'll show you what I can, and then once you get under yours, you'll see it. It's a little black bracket, but let's get under there and take a look at it. Alright, so I kind of moved this belly pan, this plastic pan out of the way. You can see I got my ratchet up in there right now, and I'm hoping I can get you. Man, I don't know. Let's see if I get the light in the right spot here. Sorry about this. Alright. So, like I said, it's just really hard to see. If you look right there, there's a black bracket coming down with a rusty kind of 12-bolt. Let's see. It's really. Let me reset this. All right, it's right above. Like I said, I don't even know if this camera's picking up. You got the big bolt right here on the side of the transmission. It's right above that. It's that little rusty 12-bolt sticking out on the side of the block there. I hope you can see it on the camera. I can't tell. Doesn't look like it's focused right, but I'm going to go ahead and take it loose, and then when we take the manifold off, I'll show it to you. But it's very tight in here. This is what I have to get it loose. I have a stubby extension and a 12 millimeter deep well with a ratchet, long handle ratchet, and that's what I use to get it loose. And then there's a nut on the top of the bracket. You could probably leave that on if you pull it all up at once, but I took mine loose. That's a 12 millimeter nut. And like I said, I can't really hardly even get you in there. So what I'm going to do is just take the, when we get the manifold off, I'll show you. But you'll be able to see it on yours once you get under there. Like I said, if you're doing a CRV or an Element or something, there's a lot more room. But these TSXs just don't have, you know, the fan is radiator's right there. It's pretty tight, so I can't hardly get you in there. But anyway, we'll pick it back up when I get that off. All right, you have four. Well, you got two 12 millimeter nuts and two 12 millimeter bolts to hold your throttle body on. I leave the hoses and stuff attached to it because I don't want to lose all that coolant and disturb that. So I just kind of unbolt it and leave it off to the side. This gas is still in good shape, so I'll go ahead and reuse that. There's nothing wrong with that. And anyway, once you get your brake booster hose and your 12 millimeter, your 10 millimeter bolt, there's a 10 millimeter up here that holds this wiring harness, and a 10 millimeter down here that holds the wiring harness. And they have a few connectors. You unplug those. You have your 10 millimeter. You got two. Now I'm saying 10. You got two 12 millimeter nuts and three 12 millimeter bolts to hold this upper plenum on. Now this should come out, so we'll pull it out, and there's going to be, yeah, there's at least one vacuum hose. It's a small one, and you don't want to forget to hook that back up once you put this back together. But let me, kind of stuck on there. Gonna get something, screwdriver, and kind of try to pry it loose a little bit carefully. There we go. So now you should be able to remove this and kind of move it out of the way. You're going to want your battery disconnected, 10 millimeter. Take off your ground. Always do that. Now we're down to the starter here. They have clear access to it. Like I said, the throttle body is right here. I'm just kind of going to have that off to the side. I'm not going to disconnect the coolant lines and stuff to that. Alright, now we're down to the starter. Got the solenoid. On the solenoid, you just push on the clip and pull it out. And then you have two 17 millimeter, I believe they're 17 millimeter bolts. We're going to loosen those. One of them's a real long, kind of weird one. And then the one's a short one that goes into the transmission here in the block. We'll take those off. And here's that bracket I was talking about that's underneath. This is probably the hardest part of the whole job as far as getting to it, especially on the Acuras and stuff. This side, the flat side, goes to your block. You got that 12 millimeter bolt you have to take out. And then you could leave this on. The problem with, I always take this nut out before I pull the manifold because you have a wiring, one of your wiring connectors holds it right here. And then there's another spot right here that holds wiring. So that'll get hung off if you try to pull it out with leaving those on there. So I just take the nut out and pull them, and then the manifold will pull out. So this is the hardest, in my opinion, to get to. It's the hardest to get to anyway. It's not really hard to take it out, but so anyway, when we put it back together, what I'll do is probably snap everything in down there and get it ready, and then I won't be able to show you on the camera, but you'll run this. You'll snap your connectors back together, your wiring looms. Run this through the stud, start the nut. Leave it loose though. It'll make it easier to start this bottom one if the top one's loose, so you can maneuver this to where you need it to. But we don't want to get too far ahead. That's just where we're at now. So let's go ahead and get the two 17 millimeter nuts out. I already got the starter solenoid loose. That was just an easy clip that you push in on. We'll go ahead and remove those two 17 millimeter bolts. And then the starter should come up enough to where we can get to that top battery cable. Alright, sometimes you say something, you know, it seems kind of wrong when you say it, or something's a little off, and that was the case. It's a 17 millimeter on the bottom and a 14 millimeter on top. I should know that as many as I've done of these. I've done quite a few of these. I've actually got another video on moving one of these starters, I think on a Element. I went ahead and too tight still. Took this top cable off because it was kind of getting in the way of the top bolt. It's 12 mil on this one. If you have an aftermarket starter on there, it may not be 12 mil, could be 13. And what we're doing is just taking out this weird little bolt. I'll show you why I think it's kind of weird once I get it out. It's a long. Alright. I already got the bottom loose. That's 17 again. This is what your top bolt looks like. Kind of a long bolt. This part right here, I guess they make it easier to get it out, which is kind of weird because normally they don't care if it's easy for you or not, but evidently how they did in this instance. So all we got left now is that bottom 17, which is already loose. The starter should pull out of here. Now, if you don't know if yours is working or not, you can have O'Reilly's or AutoZone or whoever sells you the starter. They can test the starter on the bench. You can test it yourself too. I have a video on that, on how to bench test a starter. So you can look that up if you don't know how to do it. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to cover that today. And I should be able to pull this out now. The big issue is just going to be some of the wiring. Harness is kind of in the way, but it will come out. Alright, so here's your starter. So I'm going to go ahead and get the new one, and then we'll set it in there, and it's pretty much just reverse of what we did, but we'll go over it anyway just so we don't forget anything together, and then end this out. Alright, so the new starter's set in there, and I got it kind of started. I'm going to go ahead and run it down with a Milwaukee, get it a little bit snug, and then we'll do a final torque on it. Get the 14 on the top. Alright, now that they're started, I'm going to go ahead and torque them down a little bit tighter, and then we're going to just snap in our wiring harness where it's supposed to be. Put your battery cable in your solenoid, hook that up, and put your nut on. Make sure it's snug. Don't over tighten your top battery cable onto the starter there because it's plastic, and if you go crazy with it, a lot of times you'll crack them and then they won't warranty them out if you break them. So just get them snug. You know, you want them tight, but you don't want to over tighten them because you can break that solenoid real easy, or that shut off, and then you're out $250 or whatever the starter was. This one was pretty expensive, so you definitely don't want to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and hook that stuff up, and then we'll pick back up. Alright, so again, don't over tighten that top nut for your starter, for the main battery cable here, otherwise you'll break the solenoid. Go ahead and plug in the solenoid, push in your connectors for your wiring harness, and you're pretty much ready to put this manifold back on. Just make sure, just double check everything, because once you put that manifold back on, there's no going back. So what I'm going to do now is put this nut and bracket on like this, and just start the nut real loose, and then we'll hook all that up, and then we'll slide this back down in there. Don't forget your little vacuum hose right here. You have to plug that in, and then when you start putting this back together, put the throttle body back on, start making connections back, and get this thing started up. So I'm going to go ahead and put that nut on that bracket, put that hose on, and slide this back in there, and then we'll pick it back up. Alright, I got the plenum slid back in there. Just going to snug them up for now. We're not going to do a final torque on them until we get them all snugged up. The final torque on the throttle body and the plenum is 16 foot-pounds. So not very much. I'm just going to kind of get these snug down, and then we'll go back over the torque wrench. At this point, it's just basically putting back everything that you took off, whatever you decide to take off. And on these intake plenums, start at the middle and work your way out when you torque them to your final torque. Throttle by, I usually do a crisscross. Alright, I'm going to do my final torque, and then I'm going to get underneath there and put that bracket back on. I'm not going to bother trying to show you that. There's no way to get a camera under there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back up the top and finish this thing up. Alright, I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but I did take out the radiator overflow. It's two 10mm bolts, and you just take off this hose and pull it out. You don't necessarily have to, but it just makes it easier to get this manifold off and kind of opens this area up. So I got it all back together, and we got the all the intake hose and all that stuff back on. So we're just going to fire it up, make sure it runs, and then we'll be done with it. Alright, so she's fixed. You know, when we came in, all it was doing was clicking, which means the solenoid's engaging, but the starter's not. So anyway, that's about it for a 08 Acura TSX starter. These are all the same. The Honda 2.4 K-series engine, they're all pretty much the same. You got to remove this upper intake. Like I said before, the hardest part's that lower bracket. It's easier on the bigger cars, and it's a little bit tighter on these. And that's pretty much it. It's not that bad. I know Scotty Kilmer made a video a while back saying how bad it was, but it really isn't that bad. So anyway, I think it's better than a lot of them where you got to get underneath it and fight a bunch of stuff. So that's about it for this one. Hopefully we'll see you on the next one. As always, God bless.